Welcome back to Viewpoint. I'm James Zogby. My next guest is Frank Sharry. He's founder and executive director of America's Voice, former executive director of the National Immigration Forum, and I want to thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you.
A new study came out by the UC Berkeley Law School on the Secure Communities program run by the Immigration Service. Before we talk about the report itself, and I want to get into the numbers, I'll put them up in a minute. Just describe Secure Communities, the program, what it involves.
It was started by the Bush administration. The idea was to have a federal, state, and local partnership, local police, federal immigration authorities, to go after serious criminals. The idea was that they're going to have the serious criminals come in the door, they're going to be booked, they're going to be jailed. The Immigration Service wants to pick up those folks to get them off the street, detain them, and deport them. That was the idea of the program. The way it's been implemented has been hugely controversial because it's become a dragnet for everyone and anyone. And so the majority of the people picked up under the Secure Communities program are driving with a broken taillight, are driving without a driver's license. Ordinary immigrants who don't have papers, there's 11 million in the United States, a population the size of Ohio, and very aggressive police, as part of Secure Communities, and a very aggressive federal agency, have led to the deportation of 1 million people.
A million people during the Obama administration.
The Obama administration now has the distinction of being the administration with the most deportations in the shortest time.
400,000 almost this year, about 396, 390, 393 last year. Let's put these numbers up. It's 1 million total, and of them, 3,600 were U.S. citizens who were arrested, finally released when they proved their citizenship. 39% of those arrested have U.S. children or spouses. 93% were Latino. Only 54% were in fact criminals, which is actually about half and half between the folks we needed to be secured from and others who just got caught up in the sweep. What do those numbers say?
Well, actually, this report, which was an excellent report, only 27% under Secure Communities were convicted or serious criminals. The Obama administration is claiming that of the 1 million people they've deported, or of the 400,000 roughly that they deported this year, 55% were convicted criminals. But they were convicted of being here illegally, crossing the border illegally, driving without a taillight. So they fudge the numbers.
Here's the question.
To make it look like they're going after bad guys.
If we got Arizona and Alabama and copycats everywhere passing these laws saying, federal government's not doing it, we've got to do it, but you have this draconian Secure Communities program, which is actually doing it, then this is actually doubly frightening. It's more frightening when I think about it that way, that you've got them piling on top of a program that's already happening.
Look, you and I both hoped and worked for immigration reform that would combine smart enforcement with a path to legal status and citizenship for the 11, 12 million people here without papers. A global, comprehensive solution.
Who are not 93% Hispanic, incidentally.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Congress couldn't get it done. George W. Bush, one of the few progressive things he did, fought for it. Didn't happen, revolt on the right, they didn't go for it. So now what we have is enforcement on steroids with no end. The prospects of a breakthrough legislatively that would allow even young people eligible for the DREAM Act to get legal status it's hard to imagine in this polarized Washington to get it done. So we're looking at states going hard right. Alabama has created a state of terror for not just Hispanic immigrants, for all immigrants.
Your first guy that got arrested is an Arab guy who turns out to be a citizen.
Exactly. And these are Arizona copycats. Meanwhile, the Obama administration has been doing enforcement like no one before, while the right wing in this fact-free debate says he hasn't done anything to enforce the law. So I'm afraid immigrants are living through a time of hurt, and the debate has really lurched to the right.
So you have the comprehensive immigration reform was enforcement and pathway.
Right.
The administration does the enforcement, and they do the fence, and they increase border patrols, saying, we'll give you this, you give us that, but...
Bait and switch. They never got to that. They never got the legal status. Now, look, Obama wants comprehensive immigration reform. He had health care and other priorities first. But quite frankly, the real problem is that Republicans have lurched to the right. You see it in the debates in the Republican. I mean,
yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to
remarkable.
just do Alabama for a second, because Alabama. I've been reading stuff about Alabama. It reminds me of Hazleton, in the sense that. I was going to write a piece called "The Tale of Two Cities," Utica, where I come from, which welcomed.
Yes.
And
They recruit immigrants, don't
right.
they?
And actually, neighborhoods are coming back to life. Businesses are opening up, and
Right.
and actually the city is growing.
Yeah.
Hazleton literally committed suicide because they not only lost those who were undocumented, but they lost Hispanic citizens who said, I'm afraid I'm going to get caught up in this sweep, as we're seeing with secure communities and in Alabama, where children are dropping out of school, including those who are citizens, because they're afraid to be there. What happens when states that actually need people literally drive people out?
Yeah, and actually Alabama is an extreme example. You know, when Hazleton passed its law in Pennsylvania, or when the Arizona law passed, the courts, for the most part, blocked it. But a federal judge, Judge Blackburn, said, you know what, most of it can go into effect. Nobody was prepared. Kids were afraid to go to school. Parents were afraid to drive their kids to school. Parents, if they have any contact with a state office or a public office, have to get turned over. Water service is being turned off.
That was the one
People
that shocked me, is the
fleeing
water
state.
service. Explain that.
I mean, apparently, one of the provisions of the law is that no contract with an undocumented immigrant is valid. So the water service is saying, geez, if we give you water, the contract isn't going to be valid. I'm telling you, what's happening there, immigrants are living in a state of terror. It is an Americanized version of ethnic cleansing going on. The idea is to purge Alabama of Latinos. You have African American leaders stepping up and saying, we have come so far from a place that resisted integration and civil rights. And now, as a famous civil rights leader in Alabama said last week, the Hispanic is the new Negro in Alabama.
Let's take a look at the GOP debate on this. This has been quite striking. Actually, if I wanted to begin with this notion, this thing we've been seeing, pilgrimages to Donald Trump, but pilgrimages to Joe Arpaio, the sheriff of Maricopa County, who has done outrageous things to prisoners. I mean, I hate to. I usually don't like to insert myself in the discussion this way, but there's some
It
things
is outrageous.
There's
We
some
just gotta
things on
call
this
it.
immigration thing that just absolutely astound me. Pilgrimages to this guy who is deserving of becoming an outcast in America, and yet he becomes the guy who gets to sprinkle holy water on candidates, and everyone's looking for his endorsement.
Yeah.
What's this say about where we are?
Well, Arpaio he conducts sweeps targeting Latinos. He has volunteers that he calls his posse, and he parades his detainees in pink underwear. I mean, he is, and the Republicans are trying to get his nomination because they think it will obviously get support on the far right. What it says is that the Republican Party, which George W. Bush fought for comprehensive immigration reform, the old John McCain, before he took whatever bad meds he took, was fighting for immigration reform. Comprehensive immigration reform got 23 Republican votes in 2006. Today, it would get 0. Lurch to the right, the Tea Party factor, the dog whistle politics of saying we whites are aggrieved because these brown people are somehow taking ours. It's a really ugly situation.
Let's look at this exchange between Rick Perry and I'm sorry. Mitt
Rick
Romney.
Perry and Mitt Romney. Right.
Rick and Mitt doing their thing at the last GOP debate.
You stood here in front of the American people and did not tell the truth that you had illegals working on your property, and the newspaper came to you and brought it to your attention, and you still, a year later, had those individuals working for you. The idea that you can sit here and talk about any of us having an immigration issue is beyond me. I've got a strong policy. I've always been against amnesty. You, on the other hand, were for amnesty.
I got 30 seconds, then we got to move on to another immigration question.
You wrote an op-ed in the newspaper saying you were open to amnesty. That's number one. Number two, we hired a lawn company to mow our lawn, and they had illegal immigrants that were working there. And when that was pointed out to us, we let them go. And we went to them and said, you have a problem with allowing someone to finish speaking. And I suggest that if you want to become president of the United States, you got to let both people speak. So first, let me speak. So we went to the company and we said, look, you can't have any illegals working on our property. I'm running for office, for Pete's sake. I can't have illegals. It turns out that once again they hired someone who had falsified their documents, had documents, and therefore we fired them. And let me tell you, it is hard in this country as an individual homeowner to know if people who are contractors working at your home, if they've hired people that are illegal. If I'm president, we will put in place an e-verify system, which you've opposed, to make sure that we can find out who's here illegally and not, and crack down on people who come here illegally.
The line that stuck out for me was, for Pete's sake, I'm running for office. I can't have illegals.
That's the money quote, Jim. That's the money quote.
Does that mean if he weren't running for office, it's just fine, okay?
I think that's what it means.
Yeah.
I think it means that Mitt Romney doesn't really have core convictions. He has shape-shifting positions designed to attract votes.
Well, what do we do with this, though? There's obviously a hostility between these two candidates and a lot of tension. It started over the fact that Rick Perry had a program in Texas where he provided tuition assistance, got booed for it at the debate, came back and said to his opponents, if you don't support something like this, if you want to drive these kids out, you don't have a heart. He got nailed for that. This is a very, very intense issue. I don't quite understand the Rick Perry contradiction on this. Compassion coupled with a real hardline policy on the issue. But clearly he is viewed as having plummeted in his polling numbers in large measure over this issue.
Yeah, Rick Perry had a sensible approach. 13 states have done it. Let kids who grow up in a state go to college in the state at in-state rates, the same as their neighbors. But that was 2001. What's happened since 2001? Remember, that's when George W. Bush was elected, was president, negotiating with Vicente Fox about an expanded, liberalized immigration scheme. So what you have is this party has gone so far right on this. There used to be a split in the Republican Party. There was kind of the business conservatives and libertarians who said immigrants who work hard and come to this country at the high end and the low end of the scale are great for the country. Now you have the majority of politicians in the Republican Party saying kick them out and keep them out.
Talk about moving to the right on this issue. Let's see Herman Cain.
Will have a real fence, 20 feet high with barbed wire, electrified, with a sign on the other side that says, it can kill you.
He has since said he didn't mean it, it was a joke, and then came back and said, I did mean it. I'm not backing away from that. It's a laugh line, just as the you don't have a heart becomes a boo line. These are frightening times.
Really frightening times. You know, the idea someone who wants to come to this country to work hard, something that has been the formation of the United States as a nation of immigrants, the idea that we're going to electrocute you, we're going to treat you worse than a murderer or a rapist because you're a Mexican or a Central American who wants to come here and work. Honestly, I am scared for our country. When I was in Alabama recently. It is an America I don't recognize. It's an America I read about back in the 50s and 60s that I thought we had grown out of. And when I hear Herman Cain, one of the leading candidates in a major party, say, let's electrocute people who want to work hard, I don't recognize it.
Let's get you in the conversation out there. If you want to give us a call, if you're calling from overseas, the number is 001-202-420-5665. If you're calling from here in the U.S., it's 1-202-420-5730. Let me just get the Rick Perry quote. We have it on the board just to read, didn't get it from the debate itself. He said, if you say we shouldn't educate children who come to our state for no reason other than that they've been brought here through no fault of their own, I don't think you have a heart. We need to be educating these children because they'll become a drag on our society. A position that I think he got booed for it, but he
got booed for it, and it probably resulted in him plummeting in the polls to some degree. And I think it says more about the Republican Party that someone who says, let's educate kids who are going to end up staying here is booed. Why? Because those kids are from some other country.
So the president and Harry Reid are saying we're going to have a vote on immigration reform before the end of the year to show the difference, to establish the comparison. Is that enough, or does that come off as politicking without a serious intent of passing the legislation? I mean, weighing the politics of this, if you will, for a moment, does it work?
It'll work some. I do think that the Democrats are smart to exploit the advantage that they have with immigrant communities, Hispanic voters in particular, on immigration with Republicans. I think the real action, though, is not a show vote in the U.S. Senate. It's whether Obama, the president, is going to do more to protect immigrants at this time of peril. He's been making speeches in the past saying, I don't have the authority, it's up to Congress, blame them. But in August, he made a really sensible policy change, saying we're going to use discretion. We're not going to go after families with veterans. We're not going to go after kids who have been here and graduated from school. We're not going to go after moms who have been here 20 years who have U.S. citizen kids. But his Department of Homeland Security hasn't implemented it. And there's more he could do. I want Obama to be running for election, appealing to Hispanic and other immigrant communities, saying, I've done everything I can, and I'll do more as soon as Republicans come to the table. The problem he has with the Latino community in particular, Latino immigrant voter, is that they know he hasn't done as much as he can. They read these, they have experienced secure communities. They have loved ones who have been deported. And until that changes, the opportunity that Republicans are creating by running hard to the right will not be exploited sufficiently by Obama as a candidate.
Let's go to Ohio for a call. Caller?
Yes, I was calling to tell you that I'm just watching the program for the first time. But this is a brilliant program. I wish you guys were, on the airwaves in different stations. And, so that people can have different point of views about these immigration issues, because it needs to be addressed,
Well, I'm glad you got us on the station that you got it. Do you have a question for us?
No, I just have a compliment for you guys. It's a beautiful show, and I'm loving it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, this guy is an awesome leader, and it's just an honor to be with him.
Thank you. Tell me about the debate itself. He said this is an issue that ought to be being discussed.
Yeah.
We've got this Republican debate going on. We have this non-debate in Congress where you're going to get a purely party line vote, although some Democrats you'll probably lose. But is there, in fact, a discussion going on around the country, or does it reflect the same polarization you get here in Washington?
It doesn't. I think the politicians are more...
It does or it doesn't?
No.
Okay.
There is a debate going on in the country, and the public is not in the same place as the politicians. Look, even the Republican Party, which you hear people screaming affirmatively for an electrical fence that would kill people, most Republicans support comprehensive immigration reform with a path to legal status for the people here without papers. Not most Republican candidates, because in the primaries, the folks on the far right have a disproportionate influence. The interesting thing is that among Democrats, this has now become a real progressive priority. People say, wait a minute, this is about people of color being kept down, being disenfranchised, being exploited. We recognize this story.
Here's the problem, though. It's also about every other ethnic immigrant community. There are hundreds of thousands of Irish undocumented, and Polish undocumented, and Italian undocumented, and yet no attention paid to them and no effort to bring them into the discussion so that it becomes a Latino issue when it ought to become an immigration issue, broadly speaking.
Yeah, fair enough. And you've done a lot of work to try to make it immigration the way it should be, which is it affects every country and every community. The reason that there's so much emphasis on the Hispanic community is because, quite frankly, we realize that Republicans probably won't come to the table until they get spanked politically by the Hispanic vote so often that they realize they have to sue for peace.
Okay, let's go to New York for one last call. Caller? Hello?
Yes, my parents weren't immigrants. We came here as slaves, and this is not even in the argument of immigration, where everybody says America was built on immigration. It was built on slavery.
Okay, thank you.
Fair point. Fair point. In fact, there was a great civil rights leader from Alabama was talking about how this is a nation of immigrants with two major exceptions. Native Americans who were here before others came, and African Americans who came against their will in slave ships. And that is, I think, the great moral stain of America that we still haven't erased.
Thanks for joining us, Frank. When we come back, Ahmed Maher, one of the co-founders of Egypt's April 6th youth movement, and we'll talk about Egypt's transition and more, so stay with us.